Sometimes the strongest battles aren't fought on the front lines. They're fought in silence, inside broken hearts, between duty and forgiveness. When a 4-star general lost everything she thought defined her fate, led her to a quiet janitor with worn boots, a hidden past, and the power to change her life in seconds. What happened next would challenge everything she knew about honor, trust, and the true meaning of courage. Before we begin, if stories of kindness, redemption, and second chances speak to your heart, we'd be honored to have you join our channel, Soul Moment Story. Subscribe, stay with us, and let these true-to-spirit tales remind you that sometimes miracles don't come with thunder. They arrive softly in the hands of ordinary people. Now, let's begin. The room was quiet, too quiet for a place that had once pulsed with orders, laughter, and the steady hum of confidence. Now the command center of Naval Station Norfolk looked like a battlefield of silence. Dozens of monitors flickered in red warnings, alarms long since muted, as if even the machines were ashamed to draw attention to the failure. Admiral Amelia Drake stood at the center of it, all her back straight, but her soul collapsing inward. The words, "Security Breach Level Omega," glared from every screen, casting her decorated uniform in a crimson glow. Medals she'd earned from 2 decades of service shimmered faintly under the emergency lights, each one now feeling like a reminder of what she'd lost in seconds. Outside the glass walls, the harbor lights of Norfolk glittered against the dark water. She had once found comfort in that view. Tonight it mocked her. "Ma'am," a young officer's voice trembled behind her. "Cyber Command confirmed. The Hydra defense grid is down. We've lost satellite control, encrypted communication, everything." Amelia didn't move. Her hands rested on the console as she whispered more to herself than anyone else. "How long has it been compromised?" 7 minutes, 43 seconds. "Ma'am." 7 minutes. That was all it took to erase a lifetime of precision, discipline, and honor. She had built her career on being unbreakable, a 4-star admiral, the first woman to command the Navy's Strategic Defense Division. She'd been called Iron Drake once. Now that name felt like a cruel joke. Her superior's voice echoed from the speakerphone, sharp and cold. "Admiral Drake, effective immediately. You are relieved of operational command pending investigation. Washington wants your full report within the hour." The line went dead before she could respond. For a moment, Amelia simply stood there. The ache behind her eyes pulsed like a heartbeat. Around her, officers exchanged uncertain glances, loyalty fractured by fear. They left one by one, their footsteps fading down the corridor, until only she remained in the cavernous control room. She exhaled slowly. The sound of her own breath startled her. Hours passed. Midnight crawled over the base like fog. Outside, the faint horns of cargo ships drifted across the bay. Inside, Amelia sat alone, elbows on the console head in her hands. The glow of the screens painted her reflection, a tired woman in a uniform that suddenly felt too heavy to wear. "How did this happen?" she thought. "How could I have missed it?" Her life had been defined by control, every mission, every risk measured to perfection. But the truth was more brutal. Somewhere, somehow, she'd stopped seeing the small things. Trust had become protocol. Vigilance had become habit. And now the nation's most secure system lay in ruins. The hum of the ventilation system was broken by a quiet clack, the sound of a door. She turned, expecting a technician. Instead, she saw a man pushing a mop bucket through the door, late 40s, tall with a worn olive-green jacket instead of a uniform. His hair was long, tied loosely behind his neck, and his posture carried an odd steadiness, like someone who'd known chaos before and learned to make peace with it. Amelia frowned. "This area is restricted. You're not authorized here." The man stopped, glancing at the shattered order of the room. His voice was calm, unhurried. "Ma'am, the night supervisor said to cover the operations floor. Didn't think anyone would still be here." I said, "Leave." Her tone cracked like ice. He nodded slightly, but his gaze lingered on the nearest monitor. Lines of code scrolled like falling rain, red and black and desperate. Then he murmured almost to himself, "Hydra 7 protocol. That's your failsafe layer, isn't it? Whoever breached you didn't just get lucky, they knew the structure." Her head snapped up. "Excuse me." He met her eyes. Calm, steady, disturbingly sure. "The breach pattern." "I've seen it before." Amelia rose from her chair, suspicion flaring. "Who are you?" He hesitated, then said simply, "Name's Daniel Cross. I clean floors now." "Now," she repeated, narrowing her eyes. He exhaled, glancing back at the screen. "Used to serve. Cyber SAR wing, before the program got decommissioned." That name hit her like a ghost from classified history. The Cyber Search and Rescue Unit, a hybrid team of pilots and code engineers who'd handled tech field extractions in hostile zones. Officially, the unit never existed. Her voice softened, but stayed guarded. "What are you doing cleaning command centers, Mr. Cross? Trying to earn an honest paycheck?" He paused, then added, "And staying out of places I shouldn't be in. Usually." The flicker of irony in his tone almost made her smile if she'd had any laughter left. He pointed at the screen again. "Whoever did this used internal command strings once that only exist on Tier 1 terminals. That means the breach didn't come from the outside. It came from inside." Amelia froze. "That's impossible." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something old and haunted in his eyes. "Ma'am, in my experience, the word impossible is just what people say before they stop looking for the truth." For a long moment, they stood in silence. The Admiral stripped of power, and the janitor who spoke like a man who'd lost it all before. Finally, she gestured toward the console. "You think you can prove that?" He gave a small, almost reluctant nod. "If you let me try." She hesitated. Every regulation screamed no. But she had already lost everything. And something in his voice, calm, resolute, without arrogance, reminded her of the kind of officer she used to be. "Fine," she said. "You've got 10 minutes. He rolled up his sleeves, sat down, and began typing. His fingers moved with the precision of someone who still remembered how to save lives by code alone. The room filled with the soft rhythm of keys, clicking, the hum of data streams, and the faint pulse of hope returning to the air. Amelia watched in silence. For the first time since the crisis began, she didn't feel entirely alone. Outside, the first light of dawn began to creep across the water, subtle, hesitant, almost afraid to touch the day that awaited. Inside, a single red warning on the screen turned amber. Then green. Amelia blinked, disbelief tightening her chest. The system wasn't restored, but it was fighting back. Daniel leaned back, breathing slowly. "Told you it wasn't over." And for the first time in years, the Iron General felt something she'd forgotten, existed faith. The morning light poured through the wide glass walls of the Norfolk Operations Tower, slicing through the fading tension of the night. The ocean beyond shimmered gold, and for a fleeting second, Admiral Amelia Drake almost believed the nightmare was over. But the war room told another story. Every console was manned again, but the atmosphere was brittle, like glass, that could shatter at the slightest sound. Officers whispered in corners, glancing between their screens, and the man in the olive-green jacket seated at the central terminal. Daniel Cross, the janitor who wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't look like a man who had just walked into the heart of a military scandal. His movements were calm, deliberate, almost meditative. He had tied his long hair back, revealing a face lined not with age, but with quiet endurance, the kind of look men carried after seeing too much and speaking too little. Across the room, Amelia stood watching, She still wore her uniform, though she had removed her medals before coming back in. The sharpness of her gaze contrasted with the fatigue underneath it. She had been awake for 30 hours, but her mind refused to rest. When the defense board had ordered her to cease all command activity, she had nodded, but something in her gut wouldn't let go. That instinct, the one that had saved fleets and lives, kept whispering that what happened wasn't random. And that whisper now had a name: Daniel Cross. She approached him cautiously. "You're not supposed to be here anymore, Mr. Cross," she said, her tone low but firm. He looked up from the screen, meeting her eyes with that steady calm. "Neither are you, ma'am." Her lips tightened. "You're on my base in a restricted zone, operating a secured system. That alone could put you in federal custody." He leaned back in the chair, unbothered. "Then it's a good thing I'm not operating. Just observing." "Observing what?" "The damage," he said simply. "Whoever breached your system didn't want to destroy it. They wanted to test it. They're probing weaknesses, not detonating them." Amelia crossed her arms. "You seem to know a lot for a man who mops floors." A flicker of dry humor crossed his expression. Old habits die hard. She studied him for a moment, then asked quietly, "Why did you leave the service?" "Mr. Cross." His fingers paused on the keyboard. For a moment his posture faltered, the confidence giving way to something raw and human. "Because sometimes saving one man costs you 5 others," he said. "And the math of that never stops echoing." Her throat tightened. She knew that arithmetic too well, the kind only commanders understood, when the numbers of loss carried names. "What was your position?" she asked. "Cyber SAR Wing Technical Rescue Ops. Call sign, Ghost Line." The words struck her memory like lightning. Ghost Line, the pilot-engineer hybrid, who had led the classified rescue in the Persian Gulf 7 years ago. A mission that had ended, with 4 operatives lost, and the program dissolved in silence. "You were that Ghost Line," she murmured. He gave a faint shrug. "Was." Amelia took a slow breath. The realization hit her deeper than she expected. She had once read that mission's after-action report. Ghost Line had been blamed for a decision made under pressure, an attempt to override a crashing drone system that cost lives, but saved data critical to national defense. It was the kind of tragedy that ended careers and haunted souls. "Why didn't you appeal?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Some battles aren't worth fighting if it means reliving them every day." Amelia said nothing. The silence between them felt almost sacred, 2 people who had both buried something they couldn't name. Finally, she said, "You think this hack is connected to Hydra 7? He nodded slowly. "It's built off the same framework. Whoever did this used knowledge only a handful of engineers would have, which means either someone from the inside defected, or someone higher up is selling keys." "Selling," she echoed, her brows knitting. He turned one of the monitors toward her. "These traces see that pattern. That's not a foreign cipher. That's domestic routing. Someone's been cloaking transmissions through Navy infrastructure for weeks. My guess, they're cleaning their tracks before your investigation reaches them." The logic made her skin crawl. If he was right, this wasn't just a breach, it was betrayal. And betrayal, Amelia knew, always came from someone you trusted. Hours passed. The room emptied again as night crept in. Daniel remained quietly running diagnostics, while Amelia watched from across the console. At one point, she broke the silence. "You realize what you're doing is illegal?" He didn't look up. "Sometimes, so is telling the truth." Her jaw tightened. "You talk like a man who's already given up on justice." He finally turned, meeting her gaze with quiet fire. "No, ma'am. I just stopped expecting it from the right places." The words hit her harder than she wanted to admit. Outside, the storm winds over the bay began to pick up, Rain lashed against the windows, blurring the lights of the harbor. Inside, something shifted in Amelia Drake. For years, she had lived by the book chain of command protocol procedure. But now, sitting beside a man society had written off, she felt an uncomfortable truth pressing at her chest. The system she'd devoted her life to protecting might be the same one that betrayed her. She leaned on the console, lowering her voice. If I were to, hypothetically, authorize you to continue, what would you need? He glanced at her, measuring the question. Access to the internal relay logs. And a bit of trust. She arched a brow. That's asking a lot from a general who just lost the nation's defense network. He gave a small smile. Then it's a good place to start. The air between them softened, not flirtation, but understanding. Two soldiers on different sides of disgrace, recognizing the same scar. By midnight, Daniel leaned back, exhausted. Lines of code shimmered across the screens like constellations. He rubbed his eyes. There's something you should see, he said. It's not conclusive yet, but there's a signature embedded in the breach script and ID tag. She leaned over. Who's he zoomed in? A string of encrypted initials appeared. Her stomach twisted as she read it. C. Collins, her oldest friend, her deputy commander. That's not possible, she whispered. Collins, wouldn't he couldn't. Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at her, his eyes steady but filled with something almost like sorrow. Ma'am, he said gently, sometimes the hardest truth to face is the one that wears your uniform. Outside, thunder rolled across the Atlantic, deep and distant. Inside, the last fragment of Amelia Drake's certainty broke apart. The next morning came gray and cold, washing over Norfolk like a hesitant apology. The rain from the night before had cleared, but the clouds lingered flat, heavy, colorless. Inside the command tower, the silence was brittle, as if the very air didn't trust itself to move. Admiral Amelia Drake stood by the window, her uniform pressed, but her shoulders no longer perfectly square. The reflection that looked back at her wasn't the unshakable four-star general the Navy once praised. It was a woman whose eyes had seen too much truth in a single night. Behind her, the war room was alive again, but it felt different. Lower-ranked officers whispered nervously. Higher-ups avoided her eyes. She was technically suspended, but she had refused to leave. Power didn't come from titles, it came from resolve. And today, hers was fixed on one man. At the center console, Daniel Cross, Ghostline, was setting up a terminal configuration with quiet precision. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing arms lined with faint scars that looked more like memories than wounds. His expression was calm, detached, but his movements carried a focus that commanded the room. He didn't belong there, and yet somehow he belonged more than anyone. Mr. Cross, Amelia said, stepping closer. You realize what you're about to do is against at least 5 federal statutes. He didn't look up. Ma'am, with respect, I've broken more dangerous things than statutes. She folded her arms. You don't need to impress me. He typed a few more commands, then said softly, Not trying to. Just trying to give you your command back. Something in his tone, quiet, resolute, almost humble, unsettled her. More than any outburst could have. Walk me through this, she said, forcing her voice steady. Daniel nodded toward the main display. Hydra 7's neural firewall wasn't breached. It was bypassed. Think of it as someone walking through a locked door because they had the right key. The problem isn't outside attackers, it's the key itself, and you think you can rebuild it. Not rebuild, he said, leaning forward. Wake it up. She frowned. Wake it up, he turned to face her, then his eyes sharp. Hydra 7 was designed to adapt to human command instincts. It was built with adaptive AI threading, but that part of the code was never officially activated. I wrote part of it. It's how I know what to look for. Amelia blinked. You wrote it. He nodded once. 7 years ago, before the crash in the Gulf, the room fell utterly silent. Officers exchanged glances. Some looked away, pretending not to have heard. Amelia's throat tightened. Then you're not just a technician. You're one of the architects. I was, Daniel said simply. Before they buried the project, and me with it. He began typing, his fingers moving faster. Now the rhythm hypnotic. On the giant screen, code streams danced like a living pulse. Red lines turning orange, then yellow. The first signs of life flickering through the digital veins of the system. Amelia watched, torn between awe and disbelief. He wasn't just repairing. He was communicating. The way his eyes tracked the data, the way his breath steadied before executing a line, it was like watching a musician coaxing sound out of silence. The other officers leaned in. No one spoke. Then suddenly alarms flashed again. The room filled with warning lights. Hydra 7 rejected the override attempt. Abort sequence, a technician shouted. It's triggering lockdown mode. Daniel didn't move. His eyes stayed on the screen. His hands never hesitated. Cross, Amelia snapped. It's going to cascade. Trust me, he said. His tone calm, anchored like someone who had already made peace with consequences. The words silenced her. Against her own instincts, she stepped back. He entered one last line of code: Hydra wake, command, ghost line, override. The system froze. Every screen turned black. For 3 long seconds, the room held its breath. Then softly, impossibly, the green lights returned. Hydra 7 rebooted itself, patching the corrupted cores. The main network interface flickered from offline to stabilizing. A cheer broke out across the room. Officers who had avoided Amelia all morning now looked to her eyes wide, voices rising with disbelief and relief. The Navy's most critical defense system was coming back to life, and at the center of it all sat the janitor, who wasn't supposed to be there. His expression unreadable, his hands trembling just slightly. Amelia's voice softened. You did it. Daniel exhaled slowly. We did it. The room buzzed with renewed purpose, but Amelia stayed still. She watched Daniel as he checked the secondary modules, his focus unbroken. Finally, when the others stepped out to report the preliminary status, she approached him. You risked everything. Why, he looked at her, and for a moment his guarded composure faded. Because I've seen what happens when good systems fail good people, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. There was pain behind the words, a quiet, enduring ache. She realized that the man before her wasn't just haunted by the past. He was still carrying its weight step by step through every night shift and every mop stroke. Your unit, she said gently. The one in the Gulf. What really happened? He hesitated, then answered in a voice that barely rose above a whisper. Command pulled the plug mid-operation. We were in the middle of an extraction, 2 pilots down. 1 trapped in enemy code interference. I went in to stabilize the feed. We got the data, but not the men. He paused. After that, they needed someone to blame. I didn't fight it. Amelia's gaze softened. Why not? He gave a sad half-smile. Because ghosts don't argue with the living, ma'am. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Outside, the sky finally broke open, the sun spilling across the bay like gold through cracks in gray. Ghost line, she murmured almost to herself. You brought the system back to life. He met her eyes. No, Admiral. You brought the trust back. Systems can't do that. They stood there in the hum of machines and the light of a new day. 2 souls who had both lost everything, but perhaps in this moment had found something again. Amelia extended her hand. Stay with me, Mr. Cross. I want you on this case officially. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. The offer was more than professional. It was an invitation to believe again. I'm just a janitor, he said softly. Her voice was steady. Not anymore. For the first time since her fall from command, Admiral Amelia Drake smiled, not the rehearsed smile for cameras or subordinates, but something fragile and human. And in the reflection of the glowing screen, Daniel allowed himself a quiet breath of peace. The ghosts in his past didn't vanish, but for the first time they seemed willing to rest. The war room lights dimmed to standby, and the Hydra 7 interface displayed a single restored command: status trust rebuilt. Night returned to Norfolk like a familiar ache. The storm had passed, leaving behind a heavy calm that pressed against the walls of the command tower. The lights inside were dimmed, the hum of machines soft and rhythmic, like the slow heartbeat of a wounded beast still fighting to live. Amelia Drake stood by the edge of the operations floor, the glow of data screens flickering across her face. She hadn't left since the morning's restoration. Officially, she was still suspended from command. Unofficially, the entire base was holding its breath, waiting for Washington's next move. And yet she couldn't leave. Not tonight. Across the room, Daniel Cross Ghostline was hunched over the console. Sleeves rolled up, his concentration absolute. The man who once mopped these floors was now rewriting the very code that defended the nation. The glow of the monitors caught the faint lines on his face, turning him into a figure carved out of resolve. For the first time in years, Amelia found herself curious. Not about his skills, that much she had already seen, but about the man himself. "You haven't slept in 2 days, she said, her voice carrying softly through the room. Daniel didn't look up. "Neither have you," she smirked faintly. "I'm the one under investigation." "What's your excuse?" He paused, hands hovering above the keyboard. "When I stop moving, the memories start moving instead." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. He turned to her, then the blue light of the screen reflecting in his eyes. "What about you?" he asked. "What keeps a 4-star general in a room she's been told to leave?" Amelia hesitated, then exhaled. "Pride. Duty. Take your pick." Daniel gave a quiet half laugh. "I stopped believing in pride a long time ago. It doesn't keep you warm." "No," she said, looking away. "But it's what they taught us to live on." They stood there for a moment, 2 soldiers without orders, clinging to the remnants of purpose. Amelia walked closer, glancing at the lines of code streaming across the screen. "What are you searching for?" "The origin of the breach," and he leaned back in his chair. "It's buried deep. Whoever did this knew the system inside out. It's like chasing ghosts in a storm." A shadow passed through her eyes. "You mean Collins?" He hesitated. "You said it, not me." "Collins has been my deputy for 20 years, she said quietly. "We served in the Gulf together. He was there when my ship was hit. Her voice caught, then steadied. "He wouldn't do this." Daniel didn't respond. His silence said everything it needed to. Amelia's tone hardened. "You think I'm blind?" I think he said carefully that trust makes better soldiers than suspicion, but worse survivors. His words landed like a truth she didn't want to face. She turned away, gripping the railing. For years, she had built her identity around loyalty. Her people, her navy, her country. Now the foundation beneath that loyalty was cracking, and she wasn't sure what would be left when it broke. An hour later, the rain began again, soft and steady against the glass. Daniel shut down one terminal, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We're running in circles tonight. Maybe we both need air." Amelia managed a faint smile. "You're telling a general when to rest now. Someone has to." They stepped out into the corridor, the hum of the base faint behind them. The hallway lights cast long reflections on the polished floor. For a moment, Amelia noticed the janitor's cart still parked by the door, his mop leaning against the wall as if waiting for him to return to the simpler version of his life. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. He turned, surprised. "Miss what?" "The sky. Flying. being part of that world. Daniel's expression softened. Every day. But I miss the people more, the kind who believed we were doing something good. Once you lose that, the sky doesn't look the same. Amelia looked down the empty hall. I used to think the higher you climbed, the more you could protect that belief. But the truth is, the air gets thinner up there. You stop breathing the same air as everyone else. He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "Maybe that's why you fell." She raised an eyebrow. "Careful, Mr. Cross. Not everyone gets away with telling a general she fell." "I don't mean it as an insult," he said. "Sometimes falling is the only way to learn what's worth standing back up for." They walked back to the command room in silence. The tension that had filled the air before was gone, replaced by something gentler, unspoken. When they reached the console again, Daniel opened a new file. "There's something I haven't told you," he said. She folded her arms. "Go on. I have a daughter. Ava. She's 9. Amelia blinked, surprised. 9. He nodded. "Smartest kid I know. Loves to take apart things just to see if she can put them back together again. Drives her teachers crazy." There was a faint warmth in his smile, a flicker of light in the shadow of his composure. Amelia found herself smiling too. "Sounds like her father." He chuckled softly. "She's the reason I took the janitor job here. It's stable. Quiet. Keeps me close enough to the world I used to know without getting burned by it." Her voice softened. "You gave up a lot for her." He looked at her, expression serious now. "No, Admiral. I gave up for me, but she taught me how to start giving to something again." The words lingered between them, simple, profound, and painfully human. Amelia turned back to the glowing console, her reflection caught beside his in the glass. Maybe that's what we both needed to learn. He glanced at her. "What's that?" "That strength doesn't always look like command," she said quietly. "Sometimes it looks like getting up every morning and mopping floors for a little girl who still believes in you." He smiled faintly. "That's not weakness, ma'am. That's the kind of courage I'd follow into a storm." The rain outside thickened, beating against the windows in steady rhythm. The two of them stood there, two souls in the dark, bound not by rank or duty, but by shared brokenness, slowly turning into trust. Amelia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Thank you, Daniel, for reminding me what it means to believe again." He gave a small nod. "Just doing my job." But in that moment, they both knew it wasn't true. By dawn, the base had returned to its routine rhythm, marching boots on concrete, distant drills, echoing across the harbor, the steady clatter of mechanics from the hangars. To anyone outside the chain of command, it was just another day at Naval Station Norfolk. But inside the steel and glass tower, something invisible had shifted. The Navy's most advanced defense system had been saved by a man who wasn't supposed to exist. And the Navy's most decorated admiral was now living on borrowed time. Amelia Drake had not slept. The night had been a blur of encrypted files, internal briefings, and calls from Washington, none of which brought clarity. Her suspension still stood. The review board was moving faster than expected, and though no one dared say it aloud, the implication was clear. Her career was hanging by a thread. She looked across the command floor. Daniel Cross was back at the terminal, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. His presence was unofficial, but tolerated. Everyone had seen what he'd done the night before. Word had already begun spreading through the base, the janitor who brought the Hydra 7 system back online. Some called him a miracle. Others called him a threat. "Mr. Cross," Amelia said, stepping closer. "What have you found so far?" He glanced up, his tone all business, a trail that shouldn't exist. Whoever breached Hydra didn't just use Collins's credentials, they masked them behind an internal relay chain. "Explain." "It means they didn't log in from Collins's device," he said, spinning one of the screens toward her. They logged in through it. Her brow furrowed. That requires direct access. Exactly. For a moment, neither spoke. The conclusion hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Someone close to him, Amelia said quietly. Daniel nodded, or Collins himself covering his tracks. She crossed her arms, pacing slowly. He's my deputy commander. He has clearance on every layer of the system. But he's also... She hesitated. He's been with me since my first command. We've trusted each other our whole careers. Daniel watched her carefully. Then if he's clean, finding the proof shouldn't scare him. She looked at him sharply. And if he's not, then the truth will. Later that morning, Amelia walked the long corridor to her office. The walls were lined with portraits of commanders, past men and women, whose eyes followed her, as if asking, "How could you let this happen?" Inside she found Deputy Commander Charles Collins waiting for her. He was in his late 50s, tall and still athletic, his silver hair trimmed regulation short. His uniform gleamed with commendations that matched hers. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Amelia, you look exhausted." "Comes with losing your command," she said dryly. He motioned for her to sit. "I've been in touch with the Defense Council. They're not happy. But there's room for damage control. If we frame this as a procedural lapse, not a breach of trust, you might keep your stars." "By covering the truth?" she asked. He met her gaze evenly. "By protecting the Navy. You taught me that." She held his stare for a long moment. "And what about the janitor who fixed the system when no one else could?" His jaw tightened. Cross. "Yes, he's been invaluable." Colin's expression hardened. "He's not cleared for any of this." "Do you even know who he is?" Amelia's voice dropped. "Better than you think." He leaned forward. "That man is dangerous. I ran his name through old files. Ghost Line, Cyber SAR Wing, a disaster waiting to happen. That mission in the Gulf cost lives, and you're letting him back into the heart of the Navy because he's the only one who's shown me the truth." Collins's tone sharpened. "Be careful who you trust, Amelia. I'd hate to see you go down for someone else's ghosts." Her eyes narrowed. "That sounds almost like a warning." "It's advice," he said, standing, "from someone who still considers you a friend." When he left, the air felt colder. Amelia sat in silence, his words looping in her mind. "Be careful who you trust." The phrase echoed against the memory of Daniel's calm voice from the night before. Trust makes better soldiers than suspicion, but worse survivors. She rose, went to the window, and looked down at the base. Daniel was outside walking past the hangars toward the old comms bay, his jacket catching the wind. Something in the sight of him, unarmed, unguarded, yet somehow unafraid, pulled at her in a way she didn't fully understand. That evening she found him in the maintenance wing, his laptop open beside a dismantled terminal. "You've been busy," she said. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. "I was cross-checking signal pathways." She leaned against the doorway. "You shouldn't be doing this alone. If Collins is involved, this could turn dangerous." Daniel didn't look up. "It already is." He turned the screen toward her. "This is what I found. A ghost channel. A relay port active for exactly 48 seconds during the breach. Whoever triggered it used a device registered under Collins's authority. But the access request didn't come from here. Then from where he met her eyes. Washington. Amelia's stomach dropped. "That's impossible." "Not impossible," he said quietly. Strategic Command Headquarters. Someone in D.C. covered the hack from the top. She exhaled slowly, the weight of realization sinking in. "If this is true, then none of us are safe." He closed the laptop, his voice steady. "Then we find proof before they bury us." The wind outside howled against the metal siding. In the quiet, Amelia noticed the fatigue on his face, dark circles under his eyes, the faint tremor in his hands. "Daniel," she said softly, "why do you keep doing this?" You've already lost enough." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the vulnerability behind his calm. Because someone once believed I was worth saving. I don't get to waste that second chance. Her heart tightened. "You really believe people can come back from anything I have to," he said. "Otherwise, I couldn't look my daughter in the eye." The mention of Ava brought warmth to his face, gentle, unguarded. Amelia smiled faintly. "She's lucky to have you." He shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'm the lucky one." The words lingered between them, fragile as glass. A knock interrupted them. A young officer stood in the doorway, pale and nervous. "Admiral, ma'am, headquarters just issued an order. You're to take immediate leave of absence until the inquiry concludes." Amelia's stomach sank. "Effective when now, ma'am?" She looked at Daniel. He didn't speak, but the understanding in his eyes said enough. The Navy was closing ranks. As the officer left, Amelia turned back to Daniel. "They're silencing me." He gave a grim nod. "Then I'll keep looking while you're gone." "Daniel, that's a direct risk to your freedom." He met her gaze firmly. "So was trusting me, ma'am." "But you did." For the first time that day, she smiled, a quiet, tired smile that held both gratitude and grief. "Then I guess we're both out of uniform now." Outside, as she left the command tower, the wind carried the faint scent of salt and storm. Somewhere behind her, a lone janitor remained at his post, typing against the darkness. And for the first time in her life, Amelia Drake realized that the deepest shadows weren't cast by enemies outside the Navy, but by the loyalties within it. The following week wrapped Naval Station Norfolk in an uneasy quiet. The press hadn't caught the story yet, but everyone on base could feel the tremor of something buried and dangerous. Rumors spread through the ranks like oil on water, talk of an internal traitor, whispers that Admiral Drake was being framed, that a janitor had saved the Navy's secrets, with nothing more than a keyboard and courage. But inside the silent wings of the operations tower, truth had no witnesses, only two people still chasing it. Amelia Drake stood at the far end of the command deck, watching the gray light of morning creep across the harbor. Her uniform still fit perfectly, but the weight of it felt different now. It was no longer a symbol of power, it was armor for survival. She was officially on leave, but that meant nothing to her. She hadn't left the base. She couldn't. Not while her name was being dragged through review boards in Washington, not while Daniel Cross kept uncovering ghosts no one wanted found. Behind her, the low hum of equipment marked the only sound. Daniel was at his usual station, coffee mug in hand, eyes locked on lines of encrypted code. He had converted one of the storage rooms into a covert command cell, bare, dim, improvised, but it felt alive in a way the sterile main floor didn't. He worked like a man on a mission, but Amelia could see the exhaustion in the way he rubbed his temple every few minutes. 3 nights without sleep, she said softly from the doorway. "You'll start hallucinating soon." Daniel glanced up, his expression neutral but tired. "That's assuming I haven't already." She stepped closer, leaning against the console. "Anything new?" "Plenty of noise," he replied. "Little signal? Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. I found layers of false logs buried inside the Hydra framework, digital mirages meant to point in the wrong direction." Toward Collins, he gave a small nod, or away from someone higher. Amelia sighed. "So we're hunting shadows." Daniel leaned back. "That's the thing about shadows. They need light to exist. Find the source of the light, you find the shape casting it." She looked at him for a long moment, his steady composure, his quiet confidence. "You really believe this can be fixed?" He met her gaze. "I don't fix systems anymore, Admiral. I fix what's left of people after they break." As hours passed, they fell into rhythm, 2 quiet figures framed by monitors, the glow of code washing over their faces like candlelight. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was familiar, necessary. At one point, Amelia caught her reflection in the glass and barely recognized the woman staring back, hair-loosened fatigue softening her once steel expression. Beside her reflection, Daniel's shadow flickered, and she found herself strangely grounded by it. "Daniel," she said suddenly, "why didn't you ever go back after the mission, after everything?" He paused, hands hovering over the keys. Because the people who came home weren't the same ones who left. Some parts of me didn't make it back. The rest didn't know how to belong anymore. She nodded slowly. The uniform does that. Makes you feel invincible until one day it doesn't fit the person you've become. He smiled faintly. "You're talking like someone who's been there." "I am there," she admitted. "I spent my whole career building walls so high that no one could see the fear behind them. And now, all that's left are the walls." For a moment, neither spoke. The air was heavy but honest. Then Daniel said softly, "You know, fear's not weakness. It's proof that we still have something to lose." Amelia looked at him, her throat tightening. "You sound like someone who learned that the hard way." He gave a dry chuckle. "Ava taught me that." Her lips curved in surprise. "Your daughter?" He nodded. "When her mom passed, I didn't know how to talk to her about loss. I just shut down. But she kept drawing pictures, me, her, and her mom. Same picture every day. One morning she looked at me and said, 'Dad, you can't fix everything. Some things you just have to hold.'" The memory softened his voice. She was 5. Amelia's eyes glistened. "She sounds extraordinary." "She is," Daniel said simply. "She's the reason I'm still here." Amelia turned back toward the monitors, her voice barely a whisper. "And you're the reason I still believe there's hope in this place." Later that night, Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Found something." Amelia turned sharply. "What is it?" He pointed to a fragment of data on the main screen, a sequence buried deep in the Hydra 7 logbook. Encrypted signature. It's a recurring call pattern hidden inside the breach code. Whoever inserted it wanted it found only by someone who understood the architecture. She leaned closer. "Can you trace it? I can try." He began typing, eyes narrowing in focus. The console lights flickered. Data cascaded like rainfall across the screens, then suddenly static. The power dipped. The hum of the machines sputtered. "What's happening?" Amelia demanded. "Someone's counter-tracing the signal." Daniel said, his tone calm but urgent. "They're trying to erase the log in real time." He moved, fast hands flying over the keys, redirecting the data stream through backup relays. The system hissed and beeped, heat rising from the processors. Amelia gripped the edge of the console. "Can you stop it? I can outpace it," he said. "But only if I risk exposure." "Do it," he glanced at her. "If I open the firewall from this end, it'll show my digital signature. They'll know someone's digging." "Then they'll know we're digging," she said firmly. "And maybe that's exactly what they need to know." Daniel hesitated, then nodded once. "Copy that." He executed the override. The screens flashed white, then stabilized. A new file appeared. Amelia leaned in, heart pounding. The label read, "Project Meridian. Confidential Collins. Command override authorization." Her blood ran cold. "He's in deeper than we thought." Daniel scanned the metadata. "This isn't just Collins. The authorization chain includes signatures from DC, 3 levels above your clearance." She stared at the screen, realization dawning. This wasn't a breach. It was an inside op. He nodded grimly. "And you were the scapegoat." The silence that followed felt sacred. Amelia sank into a chair, the truth heavier than any uniform she'd ever worn. Daniel sat across from her, studying her expression. "You okay?" She let out a long breath. "No. But I will be." He smiled faintly. "That's good enough for tonight." She looked at him, this man who swept hallways, fixed systems, and somehow began mending the fractures inside her that metals never could. "Daniel," she said softly, "whatever this turns into, I want you to know you're not alone in it." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Neither are you, Admiral." Outside, rain began again, steady cleansing. Inside, two souls sat side by side in the flicker of cold blue light, waging an invisible war, not against enemies abroad, but against the darkness within their own walls. The wind over Norfolk carried a chill that cut through the steel corridors of the base, whispering of storms on the horizon. To the sailors and engineers below, the day began like any other coffee in the mess hall, briefings, patrols. But for those who lived behind the walls of the command tower, the calm felt staged, almost artificial. For Amelia Drake, it was the silence before a verdict. Her official leave had turned into exile. Collins's influence in Washington was spreading like smoke, and every call she made was redirected, every message returned with the same phrase: "We'll contact you when needed." She knew what that meant. She was being erased. Yet in the shadow of bureaucracy, one man still fought for the truth. Daniel Cross had spent the past 2 nights sleeping on a cot in the storage wing, subsisting on stale coffee and fragments of data. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands blistered from hours on the keyboard. But he was close, so close to uncovering the link that would expose Collins. In the dim glow of the monitors, he looked less like a janitor and more like a soldier reliving a forgotten war. Every click of the keys was another step toward redemption. When Amelia entered, he didn't turn around. He knew her footsteps by now, steady, deliberate, but softer than they used to be. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. She crossed her arms. "Neither should you." He finally turned, offering a ghost of a smile. "Guess we're both bad at following orders." Her gaze drifted to the screens. "Any progress?" "Too much," he said grimly. "And that's what worries me. What do you mean I found a duplicate data trail? Someone wants me to find it." Amelia frowned. "A setup, most likely," Daniel said. "The deeper I dig, the cleaner it looks. It's as if the evidence was planted to frame someone." She stiffened. "Someone like you." He didn't answer. The silence said enough. An hour later, the knock came. Sharp. Authority in every strike. When Amelia opened the door, 2 naval investigators stood waiting, flanked by security. Behind them, cold, expressionless, stood Collins. "Admiral Drake," the lead investigator said. "We have reason to believe an unauthorized civilian has accessed classified defense systems under your supervision. Step aside, please." Her chest tightened. "What?" Daniel rose slowly from his chair. "It's okay," he said quietly. Collins's voice carried the smug calm of a man who knew he had won. "You've gone too far, Amelia, allowing a discharged operative to handle military code. You compromised national security." "You're the one who compromised it," she snapped. "Daniel exposed your false trail." "False trail," Collins echoed with a faint smile. "Funny, because the digital signature leading to the breach traces directly to him." He nodded to the investigator, who projected a file onto a nearby screen. It showed the Hydra 7 logs code streams marked with one name, Cross.DN0715. Daniel's face went still. "That's not possible." Collins stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You of all people should have known better, Ghostline. The Navy doesn't forget its ghosts, it buries them." The words hit like a physical blow. 2 officers moved in. The click of handcuffs cut through the air like thunder. "Stop this," Amelia shouted. "He's innocent." The investigator ignored her. "Daniel Cross, you are under arrest for unauthorized access, cyber espionage, and tampering with federal systems." As they pulled him toward the door, Daniel looked back at her. His expression was calm, not of a man defeated, but of one who had expected this moment all along. "Don't fight them," he said softly. Her eyes burned. "I can't just listen to me," he interrupted. "If you stop now, they win. If you keep going, the truth will surface. You know where to look." "Daniel," he smiled faintly, "if you can't trust me, at least trust what we built together." And with that, he was gone. The door slammed shut behind the officers, leaving the room echoing with absence. Amelia stood motionless, the sound of his words still hanging in the air like static. "If you can't trust me, at least trust what we built together." She turned to the screens. The Hydra system interface remained open, humming faintly. Daniel's last line of code still blinked at the bottom of the terminal. DC0715 access log pending verification. It wasn't just a system tag, it was a message. That evening, the base corridors felt colder. The rumors had already started. The janitor was a hacker. Drake's lost it. Collins cleaned house. She walked past the salutes and whispers, her jaw tight, her mind already working through the possibilities. Daniel's arrest wasn't the end. It was the distraction Collins needed to bury the last trail. But there was something he hadn't counted on. Amelia Drake was no longer a general bound by rank. She was a soldier, stripped of everything but her will. And she had nothing left to lose. Later that night, she sat alone in her quarters, the soft glow of a single desk lamp illuminating the scattered papers. Among them lay a photo Daniel with a young girl on a sunlit pier. Ava Cross, age 9, scrawled on the back in faded ink. She traced the writing with her finger. "If he trusted me," she whispered, "then I owe him the same." Outside, thunder rolled again, low and distant. A storm was returning to Norfolk. Amelia stood, her resolve hardening with every heartbeat. She slipped on her coat, pocketed her clearance badge, and glanced once more at the window, the lights of the base flickering against the dark sea. Somewhere out there, Daniel was behind bars. Somewhere higher up, Collins was celebrating victory. And somewhere inside Hydra's digital veins, the truth was still pulsing, waiting for someone brave enough to see it. Amelia Drake took one last look at the empty room and murmured to herself, "You taught me to trust again, Ghostline. Now I'll prove you were right." Then she stepped into the night. The wind howled over the Chesapeake as dawn crept over Norfolk, the kind of gray light that made the sea and sky look like one vast, uncertain surface. Inside her quarters, Amelia Drake sat motionless, the steam from her untouched coffee curling into the air like a fading prayer. Daniel Cross had been gone for 24 hours. No official statement, no hearing, no defense. He had simply vanished into the machinery of military justice, another ghost erased from the system. She'd spent the night replaying every moment between them, his calm under fire, his quiet humor, his eyes when he spoke of his daughter. A man who'd lost everything yet still believed in decency. No one that steady could be a traitor. But belief wasn't proof, and without proof, belief was useless. When the knock came, it wasn't a soldier. It was a courier, nervous young, carrying a sealed envelope marked "Internal Transfer Record Classified." "Sign here, ma'am," he said. She took the envelope without a word. Inside the paper was crisp official cold. Daniel's arrest order. It listed the evidence against him: system breach, signature security override traces, Hydra 7 infiltration logs, all clean, precise damning, except one line near the bottom. A timestamp, 7:15 hours, the exact minute the system had gone dark, and beside it, an unfamiliar marker, DC0715. Amelia's heart skipped. It wasn't a system tag. It wasn't a file name. It was a date. July 15th. Daniel had mentioned that date once, almost in passing when he'd spoken about Ava. Her birthday. She rose from her desk, her pulse pounding. Every instinct told her she was missing something hidden in plain sight. She went straight to the abandoned storage wing, the place where Daniel had worked before the arrest. The door was sealed with caution tape, but authority still carried a ghost of weight when it wore 4 stars. Inside, the air smelled of dust and burnt wiring. His laptop was gone, but his notes, scribbled across a dozen pages, remained scattered across the desk. Amelia sat sorting through them, strings of code, handwritten variables, coordinates, and there circled twice in pen DC-0715. Beneath it, a message in his handwriting. "If you see this, trust the pattern, not the proof." She stared at it, mind racing. What pattern? She opened one of the backup terminals, keyed in Hydra's access shell, and searched for the identifier. The system hesitated, then responded with a cascade of hidden subdirectories, encrypted layers nested within the false breach logs. Each line of code pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside one of the subroutines, she found a name, C. Collins. Her blood went cold. The program was more than a breach. It was a laundering system shifting military contract funds through dummy accounts masked as cybersecurity failsafes. Collins hadn't hacked Hydra. He had used it, and Daniel had known. The final subfile contained audio fragments, automated command responses. Amelia played one, her breath catching as a familiar voice echoed through the static. Collins recorded, "Confirm transfer authorization. Bypass Admiral Drake's credentials." Tech voice altered, "Override confirmed." DC string required Collins affirmative. Use the standard decoy, DC-0715. The words hit like a thunderclap. The code wasn't Daniel's mark. It was Collins's decoy, his signature of betrayal. Amelia sank back in the chair, stunned. He framed him. It took her another hour to compile the fragments into a single decrypted file. The evidence was airtight, but it would mean nothing if she couldn't get it out. Collins had already sealed her access privileges. The entire network was under his control. But Daniel had left one last breadcrumb, a hidden relay connection under the Ghost Line protocol, accessible only through the terminal's old rescue interface. She typed it manually. Her hands shook, but her focus never wavered. Override Ghost Line. Access, auth, Drake. Confirm, key, Ava 715. The screen flickered, then opened. A final note appeared. Daniel's voice synthesized through the system. "If you're hearing this, you found it. I knew Collins would use my name. He's not after the system, he's after control. The truth's in the logs, Amelia. Trust what's real, not what they tell you. And if I don't make it back, tell Ava I kept my promise." The recording ended with a faint hum like a breath cut short. Amelia closed her eyes, fighting the lump in her throat. "You will make it back," she whispered. By afternoon, the sky outside had turned a bruised gray. Amelia packed the evidence into a flash drive, sealed it in a plain envelope, and left the base in civilian clothes. Every hallway felt watched, every security camera like an eye that no longer belonged to her Navy. She slipped past the gate, heading toward the small military detention wing near the docks. The guard at the front recognized her instantly. "Admiral Drake," he said, startled. "You're not cleared for—" She handed him her badge, voice steady. "You didn't see me." Something in her tone, an old authority sharpened by desperation, made him look away. Inside the hall smelled of salt and disinfectant. She found the cell block at the end of the corridor. Through the narrow window, Daniel sat on the bench, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the wall. When he saw her, his lips curved faintly. "Took you long enough." She exhaled relief, breaking through her composure. "You left me a puzzle. You found it." "I did." She stepped closer, her voice low. "I know what DC-0715 means. Collins used your name. I have proof, audio, data, everything." Daniel looked down, the tension in his jaw easing. "You shouldn't be here. I couldn't let them bury you." He smiled faintly. "You realize what happens if you go public with this?" She nodded. "They'll come for me next. But the difference is, I've already lost everything." A silence stretched between them, full of everything unspoken. "Amelia," he said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For believing." She reached out her hand, resting against the glass that separated them. "You gave me back my faith, Daniel. Now let me return the favor." Outside, thunder rolled again, deep, slow, inevitable. Amelia turned, slipping the flash drive into her pocket. "Tomorrow," she said, "we end this." And for the first time in weeks, Daniel's eyes carried something she hadn't seen before: hope. That night, as Amelia walked back across the silent docks, the rain began to fall again. She didn't look back. In her hand, she carried a drive that could destroy careers, save lives, and redeem 2 souls who'd already been written off. And somewhere, deep inside the Hydra system, the last line of Daniel's code blinked alive once more. Status truth awake. The dawn over Norfolk came blood orange, smoldering against the gray horizon. Seagulls wheeled over the bay as the first light touched the hangars, the radar domes, and the white ships rocking gently at anchor. To anyone outside, it was just another morning. But inside the heart of Naval Station Norfolk, truth had finally found its way to the surface. Admiral Amelia Drake stood before the mirror in her quarters, fastening the last button of her uniform. For weeks, she had worn civilian clothes, hiding like a ghost in the shadows of her own command. But this morning, she looked every inch the 4-star admiral, again, calm, composed, and unbreakable. In her pocket, the flash drive burned like a secret ready to ignite. Behind that small sliver of metal lay the truth, the recordings, the logs, the proof that Deputy Commander Charles Collins had orchestrated the Hydra 7 breach to hide a massive web of fraud and betrayal, using Daniel Cross as the scapegoat. She adjusted her collar, drew a slow breath, and murmured, "Today we bring the ghosts back into the light." The military tribunal was convened in the grand chamber of the Operations Council. It was a cavernous room of marble and steel, lined with flags and the faces of men and women who had spent their lives defending the country they now questioned her loyalty to. At the center sat the Council 5 admirals, 2 generals, and 1 civilian representative from the Defense Department. Their eyes were cold, their expressions unreadable. Collins stood at the front of the room, immaculate in his uniform, speaking with practiced authority. "The facts are clear," he said. Daniel Cross, a discharged operative with a history of misconduct, infiltrated naval security protocols under the direction of Admiral Drake. She knowingly aided him, resulting in the Hydra breach and risking national security. I recommend full disciplinary removal and permanent confinement. He paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. This is not personal. It's preservation. Murmurs filled the room. Amelia sat at the defense table, still as stone. Her counsel whispered, "Ma'am, do you wish to make a statement?" She rose. "Yes." The room quieted. Every gaze turned toward her. Members of the council, she began, her voice steady, resonant. "I won't waste your time defending my record. You already know it. For 30 years, I served this country with everything I had. And when the system broke, I did what any soldier of conscience would do. I looked for truth, not comfort." She turned slightly, her gaze landing on Collins. "You say I endangered the Navy. But what truly endangers us isn't a breach of code. It's a breach of integrity." Collins's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Amelia reached into her pocket and held up the flash drive. Contained here are the full audio and data logs of Project Meridian evidence that proves who orchestrated the Hydra 7 infiltration, who framed an innocent man, and who profited from it. A ripple moved through the room. The presiding admiral frowned. "Admiral Drake, this evidence has not been submitted through official channels. Because official channels," she said firmly, "are precisely where the corruption hides." She walked forward, plugging the drive into the council display. The screen flickered to life. Voices filled the chamber, the recording of Collins's orders echoing through the speakers. Collins confirmed transfer authorization. Bypass Admiral Drake's credentials. Tech override confirmed. DC string required Collins affirmative. Use the standard decoy, DC's SWAV-715. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Collins's face drained of color. Amelia didn't look at him. Her voice remained quiet but cutting. The decoy code wasn't Daniel's mark. It was your signature, Commander. You used Hydra to cover an internal laundering operation and scapegoated the only man capable of uncovering it. Lies, Collins snapped, but his voice cracked. This is fabricated. Amelia turned toward the council. You can verify the encryption chain yourself. It was buried within the Hydra failsafe written in Ghostline's original architecture. Only its creator could have found it. The presiding admiral leaned forward. Ghostline Amelia nodded. Daniel Cross. The man you imprisoned. Outside the chamber, guards rushed in, bringing a restrained Daniel through the doors. His uniform was gone. He wore standard-issue khaki wrists, bound eyes calm. When he saw Amelia, he smiled faintly, a spark of disbelief and gratitude flickering in his gaze. The council chair motioned. Release him. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. Amelia stepped aside as Daniel approached the console. Show them, she said. He sat down, fingers flying over the keyboard. The room filled with the rhythmic pulse of code. Hydra keeps an immutable echo log, he explained. Even deleted records leave traces. You just have to know where to listen. Within seconds, the screen filled with cascading data, each line a digital footprint of Collins's transactions, time-stamped and verified. Bank transfers, offshore routing, command authorizations, enough evidence to unravel the entire conspiracy. When the last line appeared, Daniel leaned back and said softly, "Ghosts don't lie." The council chamber fell into stunned silence. Collins made a desperate move. "This is manipulation," he barked. "He's a disgraced technician. Nothing he says is admissible." But Amelia stepped forward. Then let the system decide. The presiding admiral, her voice cold and measured, said, "Commander Collins, you are hereby relieved of duty pending full investigation." Guards escort him out. As the soldiers moved in, Collins turned to Amelia, his mask of control crumbling. "You think this redeems you?" he hissed. "You're just as blind as the rest of them. The system will eat you alive, Drake." She met his glare evenly. "Then let it choke on me." The guards dragged him away. When the door finally closed, the council chamber erupted in subdued whispers. But Amelia didn't hear them. She looked only at Daniel. The presiding admiral cleared his throat. "Mr. Cross," he said, "on behalf of the United States Navy, your record of discharge is rescinded. You are reinstated with full honors and cleared of all charges. The council recognizes your service and your integrity." Applause rose quiet at first, then swelling. Daniel stood still for a moment, unsure what to do. He looked at Amelia. She nodded. He turned to the council and said simply, "I didn't do it for reinstatement. I did it because she believed when no one else would." Then softer, just enough for Amelia to hear, he added, "No one should have to fight alone." As the chamber emptied, Amelia and Daniel stood together by the window, watching the morning sun glint off the harbor. The storm had finally passed. "You could have left," she said quietly. "You had every reason to walk away." He smiled faintly. "And missed the best comeback in Navy history." She laughed softly, the sound unguarded. "You know you could still have a future here." He shook his head. "I already do." She tilted her head. "Where?" He looked out at the sea, eyes reflecting the light. "Wherever someone still believes a broken system can be fixed." Amelia smiled, a rare, genuine warmth spreading across her face. "That sounds like something Ghostline would say." He met her gaze. Maybe it's time Ghostline finally lived up to his name. They stood there, two soldiers reborn, not through victory, but through faith restored. The sea outside Naval Station Norfolk was calm again, a rare stillness after weeks of wind and storm. Sunlight spread across the water in soft gold, painting the docks and carrier decks with peace. For once, there were no alarms, no hurried footsteps, no whispers of betrayal, only the hum of morning life returning to rhythm. Inside the administration building, Admiral Amelia Drake walked through the hallways, as though she were seeing them for the first time. Every salute she received felt different, now not out of fear or duty, but respect. Real respect. It had been 3 days since the council exposed Collins and cleared Daniel Cross of all charges. The news had spread across the Navy like wildfire. Some called it the Norfolk Miracle. Others whispered that fate had simply decided to give justice one more chance. But Amelia knew better. It hadn't been fate. It had been faith. Quiet, stubborn faith from a man who'd already lost everything. She reached her office and paused at the door. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, the ordinary scent of order restored. Yet something new sat on her desk, a small box, polished wood, wrapped in a plain envelope. Her name was written on it in neat, steady handwriting. From Daniel Cross. She sat down and opened the box. Inside lay an old Navy medal tarnished, the ribbon slightly frayed. A folded note rested beneath it. Admiral, you found truth when no one else dared to look for it. This medal was mine once. I earned it before I learned what real courage was. Now I think it belongs to someone who showed me. Ghostline. Amelia smiled, blinking away the moisture that gathered in her eyes. She ran her thumb over the medal's engraved words, valor beyond duty. A knock sounded at the door. Come in, she said, her voice steady again. Daniel stood there, dressed in his reinstated Navy uniform, freshly pressed, simple and unfamiliar on him after years of absence. But beneath the formality, he was still the same man, calm, grounded, with eyes that carried too much life to ever be ordinary again. She rose. You didn't have to return, that she said, gesturing to the medal. He smiled faintly. Didn't feel right keeping it. You're the one who fought the real battle. Amelia shook her head. You fought harder. You fought the one inside. He gave a small laugh. You make it sound noble. It just felt like surviving. Sometimes surviving is the noblest thing we can do, she said softly. He glanced around the room, then set a small folder on her desk. This came through the system this morning. Clearance for my next assignment. Her eyes widened. Already? They're reactivating you. Not exactly, he said, his smile turning rueful. It's a civilian contract under naval systems. Training division. I'll be working on a program for veterans rehabilitation using tech to help guys who've seen too much find their footing again. Amelia's lips curved. That sounds like something you would build. He shrugged lightly. Guess I'm done hiding behind a mop bucket. She looked at him thoughtfully. And Ava, his face softened at her name. She's thrilled. Says she finally gets to tell people her dad's not a janitor anymore. Amelia laughed quietly. Careful, she might miss the simpler version of you. He nodded, smiling. Maybe. But I'll still make time to clean her messy room. Some habits are worth keeping. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet between them was peaceful now, not burdened by secrets or guilt. Outside the window, the harbor gleamed like a new beginning. Amelia turned toward him, her tone more personal. Daniel, I want to ask you something. He met her gaze. Anything. Why did you stay after everything, the accusations, the arrest? You could have disappeared. No one would have blamed you. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. Because somewhere between losing everything and meeting you, I realized something. The world doesn't get fixed by people who run. It gets fixed by the ones who stay even when staying hurts. Her chest tightened. And did it every second, he said quietly. But it was worth it. Amelia's eyes softened. You've given me something I didn't know I'd lost hope. And you gave me something I didn't think I deserved trust. A soft knock interrupted them. The door opened, and a young aide entered carrying a small case. Permission to deliver, ma'am. Go ahead, Amelia said. The aide placed the case on the desk and stepped back. Inside was a newly minted medal, silver and blue, its inscription gleaming under the morning light. Medal of Distinguished Service. Amelia looked at Daniel. It's yours. He froze. Admiral, I can't. You can, she interrupted. And you will. She lifted the medal and pinned it gently onto his uniform. For saving the system twice, once with your hands and once with your heart. The room fell silent. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice low. Thank you, Amelia smiled. You earned it. For a long moment they stood by the window, side by side, watching the sunlight spread across the base. Below, sailors moved in perfect formation, their silhouettes crisp against the deck. Strange, isn't it? He said softly. All this chaos, and somehow it ends in peace. She nodded. Maybe peace isn't the absence of conflict. Maybe it's what happens when people like us finally stop fighting the wrong battles. He smiled, looking at her. What happens now, Admiral? She thought for a moment. Now we rebuild. Quietly. The right way. He turned toward the door. And you. She glanced at the medal on his chest, then back at her desk, the box, with his old one still open, gleaming faintly in the light. I think I'll keep that one, she said softly. A reminder that strength doesn't always wear rank. Daniel nodded. Then I'll keep this one for the same reason. As he left, she called after him. Cross. He stopped at the doorway. Amelia's voice softened. Don't stay a ghost forever. He smiled over his shoulder. I won't. Ghosts only stay where they're needed. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the hum of morning duty. Amelia turned back to the window. The ships glided slowly through the harbor, sunlight rippling on their hulls. She exhaled long and steady. The war was over. Not the one fought with code or commands, but the one fought inside between doubt and faith loss and redemption. On her desk, 2 medals lay side by side, one new one old. Between them, a note in Daniel's handwriting. Sometimes the people who sweep the floors are the ones who keep the world standing. Amelia smiled. You were right, Ghost Line, she whispered. Outside, the flag over Norfolk caught the wind, and the day began again, quiet, strong whole. The morning mist drifted low over the Norfolk shoreline, soft and golden, carrying the scent of salt and fuel from the nearby docks. It was too early for the noise of drills or the shouts of sailors, yet the air pulsed with quiet life. The station once fractured by suspicion and betrayal breathed in peace again. Admiral Amelia Drake stood at the observation deck overlooking the harbor, her white uniform sharp against the blue-gray dawn. The light painted her face in gentle hues, softening the hard lines that months of war, visible and invisible, had carved there. Behind her, the base hummed awake. Distant engines started, and the faint echo of a bugle carried through the mist. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the need to command anything. She simply stood still and felt the world return to order. A faint sound of footsteps came from behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Didn't think I'd find you awake before the sun, Daniel Cross said quietly. She smiled. You should know by now, Ghost Line old soldiers don't sleep much. Daniel came to stand beside her, hands tucked into the pockets of his windbreaker. He wasn't in uniform today. The reinstatement ceremony had been 3 days ago, but he'd declined every formality since. The man who had saved the Navy's backbone preferred silence to applause. "I heard they offered you your post back," he said. Amelia nodded. "They did." And I turned it down. Daniel glanced at her, surprised. "You're walking away?" "I'm not walking away," she said softly. "I'm stepping aside. Command was my armor for a long time. I wore it so tightly, I forgot what it felt like to breathe without it." He studied her face for a moment. "So what now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I think I'll try learning what it means to live as Amelia, not Admiral." He chuckled. "That might take some practice." "Maybe, but I had a good teacher." They stood in companionable silence, watching a cargo ship ease past the pier. The waves shimmered with the reflection of the rising sun. Daniel leaned on the railing, his eyes soft. "Ava wanted to come thank you herself," he said after a moment. "But school called. She's writing a paper about heroes, and apparently I'm not one of them." Amelia laughed gently. "Smart girl. Heroes rarely are." "She asked me what happened here," he continued. "What I should tell people." I told her the truth, that kindness changed everything faster than code ever could. Amelia turned to him. "She's right." He shrugged. "Maybe. But I keep wondering if I deserve to be part of that story." "You do," she said firmly. "You're the proof that grace can grow in the unlikeliest soil." Daniel smiled, but said nothing. The sunlight caught the faint scars on his knuckles, the marks of a man who'd rebuilt his life one small act at a time. They walked along the pier, the wind catching her hair as she loosened her cap. It felt strange, liberating to let it down, to let herself be. "You know," Daniel said, "I used to think the universe ran on justice. If you worked hard enough, if you were honest enough, it would eventually give something back. And now I think it runs on mercy. Not fairness, not payback, just mercy. The small kind that people forget matters." Amelia stopped her gaze, drifting toward the water. "Then maybe that's what saved us both." Daniel nodded. "Maybe." He hesitated, then pulled something from his jacket pocket, a thin black band slightly worn. "Ava made this. She said it's supposed to be lucky. I told her I don't believe in luck." Amelia smiled. "And she probably said you should wear it anyway." He chuckled. "Exactly." She said, "Even brave people need something to hold on to." Amelia took the band and slipped it onto her wrist. "Then, I'll hold on to it. But not for luck, for faith." As they reached the end of the pier, the sun finally broke through the clouds, flooding the base in gold. Amelia paused her gaze, following a rescue helicopter lifting off in the distance. Its rotors sliced the air in steady rhythm, the insignia on its side catching the light. Daniel followed her eyes. "Hydra Unit 7, he said. "They're running a test flight." "Still sounds strange hearing that name," she murmured. For months, it represented everything that went wrong. Now it's hope. He looked at her. That's what redemption does. It doesn't erase the past. It rewrites its meaning. She met his gaze, and for a long moment the silence between them said everything. The shared battles, the nights of doubt, the quiet faith that had stitched both their lives back together. Later that morning, they walked back toward the command building. A small group of sailors stood near the flagpole, lowering the colors for inspection. The youngest among them, a recruit, barely 20, paused to salute as Amelia passed. She returned the gesture, smiling gently. "Carry it well, son," she said. "Yes, ma'am," the young man replied, pride in his voice. Daniel watched her as they continued walking. "They'll talk about you for years, you know." The general who fell stood back up and reminded everyone what the uniform really means. Amelia shook her head. "If they talk, let it be about what we learned. That power means nothing without kindness. That sometimes the strongest hands are the ones willing to reach down, not up." He nodded slowly. I'll make sure Ava hears that version." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Good. She'll believe it coming from you." They reached the observation deck again, now warm with late morning light. The sea sparkled alive, forgiving. Amelia rested her hands on the railing. "You ever think about what happened? How everything changed in seconds?" Daniel nodded. "Every day." He turned toward her. "Funny thing is, I used to think change came with big moments, missions, medals, explosions. But it doesn't. It happens in silence. In the second, someone chooses to trust instead of walk away." Her eyes met his, steady and grateful. "And in the second, someone decides to forgive." He smiled, quiet and sure. "Yeah, that too." A gull cried overhead, circling in the bright air. Amelia glanced at the horizon, the sun shimmering against the water's edge. "I used to believe strength came from command," she said softly. "Now I know it comes from compassion." Daniel looked out beside her. "Then you finally learned what the uniform couldn't teach." She turned to him, voice barely above a whisper. "And you ghostline, you finally learned to stop haunting yourself." He chuckled gently. "Maybe ghosts aren't meant to vanish. Maybe we're just meant to guide the living." The helicopter returned, dipping low over the bay in salute. The reflection of its spinning blades glinted across the water like a promise. Amelia and Daniel stood side by side, the sunlight warm on their faces, both knowing their battles had ended, not in triumph, but in peace. And as the wind swept through the flags and over the sea, Amelia whispered to the horizon, "Sometimes miracles wear worn boots and a quiet heart." Daniel glanced at her, smiling. "Then I guess we were both part of one." They stayed there until the light turned to gold, the day stretching endlessly forward, a future rebuilt on kindness, courage, and the silent strength of two souls who had learned at last that redemption isn't a destination. It's a choice made in seconds and remembered forever. Before we go, we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Let us know in the comments below. It always warms our hearts to see this little community growing across so many places and time zones. If stories about kindness, redemption, and quiet courage speak to you, we'd be honored to have you stay with our channel Soul Moments Story. Subscribe, leave a like, and share these moments with someone who could use a bit of light today, because you never know whose life a small story might touch. Thank you for spending your time with us, for every kind comment, and for letting these tales live in your hearts. Until the next story, take care of yourselves and never stop believing in quiet miracles.